Hi everyone. So welcome to the day 6 of the AWS tutorial where we are learning about the DevOps journey and how to get started with the AWS cloud itself. That's what we are learning over this particular platform and over this particular tutorial. So till now what we have covered how to set up your free AWS account, how to get started with the cloud, what were the challenges before the cloud and why cloud came into the picture. That's what we have covered till now. So in day 6 here we will be covering about elastic block storage, and then we will be further moving forward. We will be covering about your the different kinds of the block storage, and then what's the IP addresses, correct? The elastic private IP address, public IP address, and what's the difference between these two. Sorry, these three. So that we will be covering moving forward. So let's get started with the elastic block storage. So talking about the elastic block storage, it's a block storage service from AWS, correct? That means it is provided by the AWS itself, and with that can be attached to your any of the EC2 instances. That means to your any of the virtual server. And where can this be utilized? It can be utilized to store the data on your application on your server, which your application is writing, correct? So just suppose that you have deployed your one of the application on your virtual server. That means AWS EC2 instances, correct? And you are writing some of the data. You want to store that data, so you can use this elastic block storage that is also called as a volume. So this one can be attached to your AWS EC2 instance, which can be further more utilized to store the data. And if by any chance your the server which is running that goes down, so you can take the snapshot of this volume, and this volume can be now attached to a new server, and your application will be running fine with the same data, correct? So you can save your data in there will not be loss of any data. So now if you see the definition, uh, AWS EBS is a block storage service from AWS, that means AWS provided, that allow users to store and manage persistent block level storage volumes. This is also called EBS volumes, which can be used with Elastic Compute Cloud, that means EC2 instances. So this is EBS volume can be attached with your EC2 instances, which can be utilized to store the data. What are the features of this EBS? Storage volumes can be used like a local hard drive to store file or install application, correct? Just like the hard drive, you can attach this to your server, and it can be utilized as a hard drive to store the data, correct? Store to install some of the softwares that will be persisted in your server. Then you can take the snapshots means backup. So point in time copies of EBS volume that can be used for disaster recovery, data migration, or backup compliance. When we say the disaster recovery, that means by any chance your server goes down, so this snapshot can be recovered to get your data, and the same data the same volume can be created from this snapshot, and this snapshot of the this volume can be now attached to a new server, and with the help of that you can retrieve those data which has been retained to your server, correct? So it helps in that feature as well. Then encryption is the one of the feature, that means your data which is there will be secured, it will be encrypted. So data at rest is encrypted using AWS managed key or key created through Amazon KMS. So this is one of the more service provided by the AWS itself, which help you to create the encryption. So there is a two type of KMS key, actually key management service, that we call. Either you create on yourself, you define the policy and everything, like the when we say the policy, that means the permission, which kind of permission you want to grant over this particular policy, correct? So either you can create, or there is a AWS managed policy KMS key as well, that you can utilize the default one. So that feature it supports. Then volume types. So EBS offers two volume types, either you can use SSD or HDD. SSD, that means solid state drive or hard disk drive. SSD volumes are optimized for transactional workloads, like where the transactions are happening, your you can say the payment application or any kind of transactions which are happening at the runtime, correct? And while HDD are optimized for your large streaming workloads. When we say the large streaming workloads, from the words itself you can understand that when we say the streaming, it's kind of media streaming, the your video streaming, so live video playing, correct? or your live streaming, that your real gaming application, that will be your streaming one, correct? So HDD volume types will be used for large streaming kind of application, or the large streaming kind of services. Then moving forward, it is of two types, as we talked earlier as well. So type of EBS volume is general purpose SSD, that is of GP3, GP2 processor, and then provisioned IOPS SSD, correct? So you can learn more about these two. So it's a block storage service from AWS that allow users to store and manage persistent block level storage. So that the same definition what we talked in the previous slide. Then moving forward, what's the EBS bandwidth? So EBS bandwidth is the amount of data that can be transferred between EC2 and the EBS. So you have a server that is called your Amazon EC2. You have a elastic block storage, a volume where the data can be stored. How much data can be transferred from this server to the block storage, correct? So that bandwidth will be called as your EBS bandwidth. So EBS optimized instances deliver dedicated throughput between EC2 and the EBS with options between 500 to 80,000 megabytes per second. So that's our EBS bandwidth. You can say 500 to 80,000 megabytes per second. Then moving forward to the next slide, EC2 IP addresses. So whenever we launch a server, the AWS EC2 machine, we will do the demo as well in the while we will start with the demo. Right now we are going with the theory so that you understand the theory first, and then we will start the demo where we will be covering all these topics with the practical session. So in this EC2 IP address slide, public IP addresses are internet addressable. So whenever you launch your server, there will be some public IP address assigned to that. Based on that, you will have to configure that whether you want public IP address or not. So a public IP address will be assigned to the EC2 machine that will be used to connect your server with the EC2 to the internet, correct? Your server will be connected to the internet, and it can fetch any kind of the data, or it can install some of the software directly from the internet. So if you want your server to communicate with the internet, you will be configuring your server as a public IP, with having a public IP address, correct? Then private IP addresses are internal to a corporate network. So if you are going to launch your server, that for that you want that this particular server should be private to my organization only. It should not be fetched from somewhere else. So the services which I am deploying as a part of my application, that application should only fetch the server, this server. So for that you can deploy your EC2 instance, the server, with the private IP address. You cannot have two resources with same public IP address. So definitely public IP address is a kind of unique, and it can be associated with only one server. So you will not be having the same public IP address for those for multiple servers, correct? Every server will have their unique IP address. However, two different corporate networks can have resource with the same private IP address. Yes, that can be done. Your two resources can have the same IP address, but it will not be having the same public IP address for two resources. Then next point is all EC2 instances are assigned private IP address. That's also true. So whenever you will be launching one server, your virtual server or the AWS EC2 machine, whatever we say, that will be having one private IP address for sure, correct? Even if you launch the public with the public subnet in the public subnet, that will be having the internet access. It will have one private IP address as well. So that it will be like connected with the help of your private IP address as well. And if you want to make it connect with your public IP address, you can connect with that as well. So remember, when you stop an EC2 instance, public IP address is lost. Yes, that's also true. Whenever you launch a public server, and if you stop that in between, like you want to use it furthermore after some time, so you just stop that EC2 instance. So your public IP address will be lost, while private IP address will be there. It will not be lost. But there is a trick. If you want to keep the same public IP address, you can use the elastic IP address concept that we have covered in the next slide. So it's a static public IPv4 address provided by AWS. This static public IPv4 address can be associated with your any of the instance Now, if you either stop or start, the public IP address for that particular server will be same. It will not be changed. What's the usage of EIP? The same usage what I'm talking about. It can be used to associate with an instance or network interface in a virtual private cloud. Virtual private cloud, that means VPC we are talking about. So this elastic IP address can be assigned to a server, and that particular server will be having consistent and the same IP address throughout its life cycle. Either you stop, start, restart, anything, correct? The IP address will remain the same till the time you terminate. If you terminate, the server will itself go away, correct? And your IP address will be released. It can be used to enable communication with the internet for instances that don't have a public IP address, correct? So if your server does not have a public IP address, you can associate one EIP with that, and you can establish the communication with the internet, correct? There is hourly charges associated with EIP that are not associated with running instances or associated with the stop instances. Yes, that's true. EIP comes with a charges. So you should be careful when using the EIP, Elastic IP, correct? Because it does have the charges, AWS charges for the EIP. That means once one public IP address has been assigned to you, correct? So you have taken one resource from the AWS side, so it will be chargeable whether you use it or you don't use it, correct? If you have reserved that for yourself, it will be charged. So be careful when you are using, you just use it, and if you are not using it furthermore, you just release that EIP so that it will be assigned to someone else, so it's chargeable. A public IP address associated with an instance is not a static case and is lost when the instance is stopped. That's something what we talked here. When you stop a to instance, public IP address is lost, so that will be lost. And if you want to keep the public IP address remain the same, EIP address is a static public IP address associated with your AWS account. So you can attach your EIP with that particular server, which will remain the same for moving forward. What is the furthermore properties? Constant public IP address for EC2 instance, that's the property of EIP. Elastic IP can be switched to another EC2 instance within the same region. If you have created one EIP, it can be attached to one EC2 instance or another EC2 instance. You can switch this IP address to any of the server where you will attach. That server will be having permanent IP address which is assigned to EIP, correct? You have to manually detach it, correct? And yes, the major point which you should always remember, charged for an elastic IP when you are not using it. So whether you are using it or not using it, if it is assigned to your cloud, if it is assigned to your AWS account, it will be charged. So make sure that you explicitly release an elastic IP when you are not using it, correct? So you should focus on this as well. Then the difference between these three features: communication, private, public, and elastic. Private IP address communicate within the VPC, while public can communicate over the internet. The elastic one can communicate over the internet as well. It's similar to your public one, correct? Then address ranges for the private gets IP address from the subnet range. Public IP gets IP address from Amazon pool within the region. So for every IP address location, there is a AWS pool, Amazon pool. So it will come from there. Elastic gets IP address from Amazon pool within the region, similar to your public, correct? Instance we stop behavior on the stop and start. Private once assigned cannot be changed. It will be remaining. It will remain the same whether you stop the server, you start the server, or restart the server. Public IP address changes over stop and start. Once you restart the server, public IP address will change. Elastic IP address, it will not change. Do not change over instance stop and start. Then releasing IPP, released when instance is terminated. If you delete that particular server, private IP address will be lost. It will be released. Public IP address released to pool when instance is stopped or terminated. So it will go back to the AWS pool. While the elastic IP address not released remains in your account itself. Till the time you do not delete this elastic IP address, if there it is left, you will be charged for that. So you should focus on this every time. Automatic assignment receives private IP on launch of your EC2 instance. So whenever you will be launching one EC2 instance, you will receive one private IP address associated with your server. Public IP receives public IP on launch of EC2 instance if public IP addressing attribute is set to true. So you have to set this attribute enable disable, so that you will have to set while launching this particular server. So then you will be getting the public IP address. This automatic assignment for the elastic have to explicitly allocate and attach EIP. So you will have to separately create EIP, elastic IP address, then separately one EC2 instance, and now you will have to establish the communication between these two. That means you will have to explicitly attach this elastic IP address with your server. Correct. Examples: application server database for the private one, where application servers and the database, your private IP address can be used for that. Like if you want to secure your database, so you will be launching that in private server with the private IP. Public one, web servers, load balancer, you can utilize this where you want to distribute the load, you want to run application which can be accessed with your public IP address. For that you can use assign public IP. Elastic one, web servers and the load balancer, similar to the public one because it can also communicate with the internet, the similar thing. So this is all for this particular video. We will be talking more in the day 7, like the tomorrow video. And if you do have any questions about this EC2 instances, you can ask me in the comment section, and I'll try to answer that. Now further moving forward, we will be talking about the user data and all those things. So for this video, that's it. So let's meet in the tomorrow video. Till the time, thank you.